Hello and welcome. Thank you all so much for joining us today. My name is Kate and I will be your host and moderator for today's session. We have an exhilarating panel lined up for you today, but before we get into the details, I wanted to take a moment to quickly run through some housekeeping for today's event. So in a moment, I will bring our panelists onto the screen to introduce themselves, and we'll run the session for about 45 minutes. For the last 15 minutes of today's session, we'll dive into the Q&A. So as we go, please do post any questions you have in the Q&A box that you can see on your screen. We can't promise we'll get to everything, but we will work to curate some of the most common or standout questions. And for the best experience for everyone, don't worry, your questions will be anonymized for the audience. So please don't be shy in coming forward. And there's no such thing as a stupid question today, as I will aim to prove in moderating. Now, you've all signed up today because the communications industry is on the cusp of an AI-driven transformation, or so they say. With AI automating many tasks, reporting, personalizing messaging, providing deeper insights, do comms teams really have the skills and strategies to fully leverage it? But where does it stop? Is AI really coming for our jobs across comms, or do we finally have the ability to get on top of the data explosion and the forced pace and race to be the fastest and the first, and finally focus on our craft again? Now, I don't have all of the answers, but our panelists do, or at least they have a perspective on the AI gap, its challenges, and how we can equip ourselves as a comms industry to thrive in this new era. So let me now bring our panelists forward to introduce themselves in their own words. And in doing so, if the panelists could briefly share their perspective on the biggest opportunity AI presents for comms professionals right now. First up, I'd like to introduce Steve Clayton from Microsoft. Welcome.
Okay. Hello there. It's great to be here. And I'm coming to you live from Seattle, where the weather is not quite like this in the background. We have the traditional rain here today, but it's 8 a.m. I'm Steve Clayton. I lead a team called Communications Strategy here at Microsoft, and I've been at the company a long time, but I've spent the last 2 years really working on generative AI and how we apply it to the business of communication. So very much looking forward to the conversation.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Good to have you here with us. Now, please give a warm welcome to Rachel Lloyd from EY. Hi, Rachel.
Thanks, Kate, and thank you very much for inviting me to join you. Yeah, I'm Rachel Lloyd. I am the Global Director of Media Relations and Social Media for Ernst & Young. I lead a team of 31 in-house PR professionals. We work right across the EY global business, across all the different sectors and services. And we support 150 member firms. We've been heavily involved in the rollout of AI, working with our alliance partners to help our clients as we live through what I would describe as the most transformative of times.
Yeah, great. Good to have you part of this panel, Rachel. And then finally, last but not least, Brian Snyder from Axicom. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you, Kate, Steve, Rachel. Thank you so much for joining us today. Leading innovation for a future-forward agency like Axicom is just a dream for me. So my role is a blend of futurist, tech industry analyst, client counselor, product manager, researcher, AI developer, workshop facilitator, coach, and instructor, kind of all rolled into one. And as Kate said, AI is becoming more than a tool, a collaborator, really, and it's forcing a fundamental shift in how we think about communications. There is this quote from Harold Burson that always weighs on my mind for this. He said, "Our job as public relations is to help our clients and employers fashion and implement policies and actions that accord with the public interest, and to use communications to explain those policies and actions." So I think that AI lets us really do what Harold wanted to do at a speed, scale, and level of insight that he couldn't have imagined. So it helps us understand our audiences more deeply, simulate the impact of our choices, and really communicate in real time. So I think about that the promise of AI for comms isn't just about efficiency, it's about foresight, it's about empathy at scale. And the question I think for all of us is, are we ready to use it that way?
Take over my job and start moderating. Well, let's dig into it then, because what I'd like to do is actually talk a little bit about AI taking the initiative. So I think, you know, I've spoken to all of you about your own perspectives, and we've sort of moved a little past the tools point, and really becoming a much more proactive partner in comms. So Steve, I'd like to start with you, because I expect there are a lot of people watching this today who have a level of expectation of Microsoft's internal adoption of AI. So could you clarify for us and share any specific examples of how AI is actually proactively contributing to your comms strategy?
Yeah, well, we have 300 communicators globally, Kate, and you know we have the fortune of being maybe 1 or 2 steps ahead of most people on this journey because we're creating this technology. And so we talk about, there's a phrase at Microsoft called dog fooding, which is not a particularly great phrase, but it basically, we talk about eating our own dog food, so being the first users of our own products. And so we talk a lot about how our communications team is customer zero for this technology. And so we've, you know, had access to the technology for getting on for 2 years. And it's been a journey. And so 2 things I would say. One is the adoption is, it's not linear, it's not predictable. You may assume that just because we're Microsoft and we make the technology, all of our communicators on day 1 immediately started using generative AI. And the answer is they didn't. In a classic technology adoption curve, you have some people who are, you know, the very early adopters who are excited about the technology. You have people who are laggards who are, you know, too busy or not interested or for whatever reason are not using the technology. And then you have a whole group of people in the middle who are not quite apathetic, but frankly are just busy. And nobody sat there saying, gosh, I have an extra hour in my day to go and play with AI today. So one of the biggest jobs, challenges, what I'd love to talk about today for us has been, how do we really help people shift their behavior over time to make it part of their daily workflow? And so that is frankly the biggest thing that my team and I are working on right now, is really just trying to get people to weave it into their daily workflows. Having said that, we have seen a whole range of areas where it's really definitely helped with the workflow. And, you know, we surveyed our communicators at the start of this journey and said, what are the challenges they have? And the challenges are the challenges we all have, you know, not too many meetings, not enough time to focus during the day, and information overload. And after 18 months, we resurveyed them, and they said they feel more productive, they feel more creative with these tools. But the most rewarding part of the feedback we got is that people are enjoying their job a lot more, because they're having to do a lot less of the sort of repetitive drudgery type work of filling out forms or creating the same exact briefing document over and over again. And so we're really focused on that aspect of where can we take this low-hanging fruit of things that AI is very good at, like transcription, translation, summarization, you know, document creation, coming up with ideas for social media posts, and really trying to combine those 2 concepts of where do we find the low-hanging fruit, and then how do we get people to really change their daily workflow and patterns to drive this adoption curve.
That habitual change, I think, is a common theme. And Rachel, I know for you at EY, you've very much been early adopters of AI, working alongside Copilot for quite some time. So how has the integration of AI contributed to your comms efforts, and has it had the same impact on efficiencies and effectiveness?
Yes, it has. And we've actually been on quite a similar journey, I think, to Steve. I always feel we're very privileged. So Steve and I have access to the technology, and it does put us in quite an advantageous, I think, position. We also classify ourselves, although we call it client zero, where we test everything on ourselves. And I think that's the biggest thing for us, is that we are being encouraged to use the technology. So there's close to, you know, there's 400,000 people at EY, and we've offered, you know, training, the rollout of training, upskilling to close to 400,000 people, which is pretty incredible. I was also one of the very lucky few, and again, I say lucky, and I feel very privileged to actually have one of the Microsoft 365 Copilot licenses. So I was an early adopter of that. And actually, Steve, I think EY was your first customer. I think we were the first rollout of it. So I've actually had it embedded in my laptop, my machine now for some time. And I don't know how I lived without it. So I'm using it every 3 to 4 minutes, whether it be helping to reconstruct a sentence, or you know, asking it to do something with PowerPoint, or you know, rewording an email. It's just become so quickly just part of, like, our everyday working. And I think just in terms of like encouraging and supporting teams, it is about giving access. I think this access, so this privilege and this access piece is really key as we move forward as an industry. And I think as communication like leaders and people in the industry, we have a responsibility to help, really provide access to these tools. And that can be through, introductions to the tools, experiments, trials, allowing people to, spend time using them. I've certainly in my team had guest speakers come in and speak to the team. We have monthly meet and greets. We have like innovation sessions. I've joined other sessions as well, where I'm working with people across the wider business as well, again, to help me upskill and learn. And so I think I think for me, that's been really key.
Yeah, that privilege and access, I think, is a very good and valid point. And Brian, you're part of an agency that's owned by WPP. So the assumption would be that you also have a similar degree of privilege and access. So from your perspective, how are you seeing AI help agencies take the initiative in comms? And to Steve's point about that habitual change, what are some of the bigger challenges in getting teams to take a proactive approach?
Sure. So I think the first bit you mentioned about the privilege and the tools that we have. One of the tools that we launched just this year was Decipher Tech, which allows you to basically get focus group level insights into how a message might land before you can even take it to market. So it's not necessarily just generative AI that we're looking at, but also this kind of cognitive AI. So these models are trained on real research that we did with frontline IT workers, senior IT decision makers, senior business decision makers, and developers. And these tools let us basically take, whether it's a press release or a tweet or a social post, a blog post, an executive quote, and get focus group level feedback on it to help us decide in advance, how's this going to land, and give us that kind of foresight. So when I think about technology helping us be more proactive as communicators, that's one of the things that I think really is helpful. Now, Kate, you also asked about what are some of the challenges to adoption. I think the biggest one is overcoming fear. A lot of people are worried about, AI is going to come take my job. Communications is always on the top of those lists of the jobs most likely to be impacted by AI. And I think about this and think about what sorts of things is AI good at. And Steve talked about some of them earlier. If we allow AI to do some of those jobs, it frees us up to do higher level strategic thinking. So this might resonate with Rachel, but when you think about accounting, there used to be rooms full of bookkeepers who would keep ledgers on paper, right? And that whole room full of people became a spreadsheet, and that job went away. But that didn't mean that the role of accounting went away. It actually is more important than ever, strategic accounting to help companies. That's, I think, what the opportunity is for us as communicators, is how can it come and help us take care of some of that lower level work like Steve was talking about, and then really up level what we focus on.
And that
there
probably
is a talent gap. Sorry, just to add to that, Brian, there is actually a talent gap for accountants. So we're actually struggling at the moment globally. All of the, the whole industry, it's not just EY, but the whole industry is suffering because less people want to be an accountant. So if there's anything that we can do to incentivize, to make that role and that job more attractive, given the fact that, that there is a risk element still to accountancy, you still need that forensic, human element to it. I just think this could be it. This is maybe the answer we've been looking for to help with that, maybe plug some of that, that talent gap and make it a more attractive profession.
Making it more attractive. Well, as we talk about this notion of AI will take our jobs, and actually that at a junior level in comms it can be a bit dry. I guess a question for this group would be, what are some of the common misconceptions about AI's capabilities in comms, and how can we address them? I don't know who would like to take that, if anyone's got a thought on the misconceptions.
I'll give you two. The first one is that AI is all about automation. And I don't believe that that's true. Yes, it does automate some things, but it automates them to the end of augmenting our intelligence as humans. So and that ties directly into the other misperception that I think about often, which is uh, AI is not done, or the output is not done when AI is done. You got to keep a human in the loop. You got to review what's coming out of the AI, shape it, add those kinds of strategic insight, the human element, like Rachel talked about, and empathy, because these are things that a machine can't do, at least not yet. And so, how do we use these machines to help us get after the things that really matter?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess,
Steve,
just to build on that really quickly, just to say, I agree with you. I don't think it will take jobs, but we might hire differently. So that's for anybody that's coming into the profession, the PR comms profession. I do think you need to think about your skills and how you show up, because I think we'll be looking for more personality hires, people who can, make decisions, be client facing. That's where we still need people. Whereas those other kind of tasks, I think that, there will be a role for AI to play there. So I think you made a good point there.
I love what you said, Rachel, about the talent and the skills that we need to hire for differently. That you used to get ahead in PR by starting at the bottom, doing clip reports, maybe working your way up to writing press releases, and you got really good at like the tactical skills along the way. And eventually they were like, "Oh, you're really good at writing. Now you get to manage the people who are writing," even though that's a very different skill set. I think that going forward, we're going to need to see more personality, humanity, strategic thinking. Critical thinking skills are some of the most important things. So we might even be looking at less of hiring people just for their comm skills, but more for their ability to be a business consultant and really understand our clients' businesses, to be able to offer better counsel that's augmented with AI.
Now, I'm going to move us on to look more at some of those real world applications rather than sort of what we might be expected to see. So I'm really looking for concrete examples of how AI is being used to really enhance storytelling, streamline the workflows, even deepen audience connections. And maybe this question could actually be for everyone, but I want to direct a little bit. So I'm going to throw it to you first, Rachel, because as far as storytelling goes, EY's seen significant engagement in AI communication strategy, but removing AI from being the story to helping us enable storytelling. Do you have any specific examples of how it's helped you at EY deepen audience connections or enhance the storytelling?
We are definitely able to work faster and get more out at speed. So we have definitely been able to free up some of the team's time, which I think has been a huge benefit. So we're just being a little bit more agile with the news agenda and being able to jump on stories, offer comments, etc. Because we're able to turn around FAQs, comments just a bit quicker with the tools that we've got. I think the biggest thing for our team, though, will be I also look after, in addition to media relations, I look after social media, which is obviously a huge part of storytelling. Our LinkedIn channel for EY has just under 10 million followers. So it's a really powerful channel for us. And actually, I think this is where AI is going to have the biggest benefit for us. So my team currently is trying to manage, so we have 150 member firms and they all want access to this one LinkedIn channel. We get about 500 requests, maybe a day, to get content out. I have 2 people on my team currently actually working with somebody from Microsoft to help build our team's first agent, we're basically programming it at the moment. We're training it at the moment and prompting it at the moment. But the idea will be that it will potentially help with some of this approval process. So basically providing like a bit of a tick list, like, don't include this, do include that, your image is wrong, you're in the wrong format size. Again, just freeing up the team's time. And I'm hoping that will help us just continue to up our game, particularly with social and storytelling through, what for us is an incredibly important channel and tool.
Yeah. Steve, I know you had quite a strong perspective on the ability of using AI to get more creative and spend more time in improving the quality of the work. Could you talk a little bit about that?
I would say three different things. One, and I'll give you some real concrete examples. One is like we're looking for work on create tools that give our teams sort of instant high utility. And one that sounds very trivial, but has been arguably the most popular thing we've built is an acronym finder agent. So literally you type into a prompt, what is this acronym? And we're a company that has a lot of acronyms, and I'm sure a lot of other people here are too. And even if you're an old stager like me, like trying to keep up with the acronyms, this company is hard work. And you don't want to sort of in a meeting be like, oh, I don't know what that acronym means, and you sort of look stupid. So now we've got this very simple tool, and it reasons across all of our corporate intranet, and we have an acronym database inside of the company, and you can get very quick answers. And we put that out there. It took us about 10 minutes to create. And people were just like, oh my God, where has this been all of my life? Like, it just helps me every day. So that's one that gives high utility. Then we've looked at where can we, back to this low hanging fruit idea. We do, we still do a lot of sort of interviews where we'll do the transcription of those interviews, right? So we've all been into staff and executive interview, or we do an interview that's online and you hit record and you record and you've got this audio file, and then you get it transcribed. And up until recently, we were still getting a lot of those transcribed by a human person. We still do some of that for super high accuracy. But transcription is good enough now that it will do about 90 to 95% accuracy easily on a good audio file. And the challenge we had is you've got all these different people in the comms business who are recording these interviews, sometimes on their phone, sometimes on their PC. And the resulting transcripts therefore sit all over the company on somebody's PC, on their phone, in a SharePoint site. And so we built a really simple tool that anybody now through a web page can upload an audio file, and it will ask them what language is the audio recorded in, and it will transcribe the file, and it will say, do you want this translated into other languages simultaneously? And then after about 5 minutes of doing the upload, it will send you back a Word document with the transcripts. And that's fantastic, like for speed and efficiency. But the real byproduct of that is now all of our audio files and all of our transcripts are in a single location. They're all stored in one SharePoint site. And then the real byproduct of that is now we can use AI to reason across that SharePoint site. So I can very quickly, if I need to find out what did my executive say in an interview 3 months ago with the Financial Times, I don't have to go and scrabble around to find out where the transcript is or who has it. I can just hit a prompt and say, what did that exec say in the interview with the FT? Boom, I get the answer. So that's provided us with super high utility. And then the third one is something Rachel said earlier really hit with me, is just this, it gets back to this behavior of how am I using it every single day. And so there's this new, both in ChatGPT and coming soon to Copilot, this new deep research capability. And this, for me, has just like changed the game. And I'll give you a really simple example because it's this much, much deeper use of AI. And so I was working on a project last month. It was the 50th anniversary of Microsoft. And I needed to come up with a list of 120 Microsoft products that have been released over the last 50 years. And I thought, God, this is going to take me a couple of days, or I'm going to have to go to the Microsoft archives and work through this. But I didn't. I used this deep research capability, and I said, hey, I would like to build a list of 120 products over the 50 years of the company. Please provide it back to me in a bullet point list with the name of the product, the year it was released, and the category that product was in, hardware, software, whatever it may be. I said, also give it back to me as a comma-separated values file so I can import it into Excel. And the deep research tool asked me a set of clarifying questions. Do you want just a certain type of product? Do you want all products? Are there any that you want omitted? I gave it some feedback. It went away. It did a 20-minute body of research that literally the process it goes through is it will go to one site like Wikipedia, find some answers, and then it will go and test those against another site. And so you can see its chain of thought as it does this. And ultimately came back 30 minutes later with this document that was unbelievably good. And I checked it and it had 3 errors in it. And it took 30 minutes. And then it took me 30 minutes to check it. And that would have been a 2-day project. And it's just like that stuff just blows my mind. And so Researcher is something I'm using literally every day just to ask it to almost just as a a treat. I'll be like, oh, I wonder if research can go and research this thing for me, and the stuff it comes back with just blows my mind.
That's super interesting because typically in comms, we don't necessarily have very analytical people who do struggle to apply their talents to digging through data. They're much better at the creative side of it. So, and also that you've stopped having to rely on people's brains to search for stuff. That would transform my life. The way teams often rely on memory of the team of how things worked. So,
and I think it's okay just to pick up on that though. One of the things that I think we're just forming an AI habit. The way I talk about it to our team is, we've trained ourselves as an industry, as a profession for 20 years to, when we need to find something, to use a search engine. And we sort of need to untrain ourselves, because now when we see a prompt box, we type something in and we expect to get an answer and we just take that answer. And with this technology, you can have this back and forward and this iteration. And no, that wasn't quite what I was looking for. Can you redesign it this way? Can you refilter it this way? And so I've got nothing against search. Like, it's incredibly useful. But now for me, every time I find myself go into a search engine, and I use this one called Bing, other people apparently use one called Google, but whenever I find myself going to a search engine, I stop myself and I go, nope, I'm going to go and use Copilot or ChatGPT for this.
That's
two things, if I could jump on what Steve was saying. First of all, that tool for the transcription stuff sounds lights out amazing. I hope that you end up releasing that as a tool for other communicators. It's time to make Microsoft Communications a profit center, maybe. But for those of us who aren't lucky enough to have Steve's development resources, I just want to throw out a tip. Microsoft Word Online has a transcription function where every month you can upload up to 300 minutes of audio. And it doesn't matter if you have a full Copilot license or just a regular Office license. And it transcribes and it diarizes, meaning that it matches up the names of the people. And it just seems like magic. So that's been a huge workflow for us at Axicom, and something that I think everybody here should go check out today. It's not in the desktop version, it's only in the web version. So you go into Word Online and go to transcribe. And then the other thing that Steve talked about was some of the change in consumer behavior of what happens when we have access to AI answer engines. There was a great study that Bain did a couple months ago where they said 80% of people, 40% of the time, rely on the AI overview at the top of the search results. Or they go right to ChatGPT and they ask there. So they're not necessarily going through and reading through the list of 10 blue links like we used to do back in the day when we were all search-centric. We're now answer-centric. And I think that there's a really interesting bit of tension there for communicators to think about, how do we need to communicate differently in a world where people might not be reading the actual coverage that we've landed. They might be reading an AI summary of it. So it's almost in our best interest to figure out how to influence the AI answer engines of today and the personal AI agents that we'll all be carrying around soon, to be able to think about, how does our brand show up in these AI answer engines?
I think that's a really valid point, actually. And I do want to pick up on that, because I was reading a piece, and it was towards the end of last year, who was in charge of SEO. I forget her name, at the Daily Mail, but she was saying the impact the AI overviews have in search now on their SEO is wild. And so the key takeaway was that focusing on brand has never been more important now, with the way that people are now accessing and looking at data. So I'm going to move us on, actually, to talk a little bit more about the ethical considerations, because yes, AI brings immense potential, but there are different ways that we need to think about things, and also the ethics behind it. And I'm sure we can all agree that ethical practices have to be at the heart of any comms strategy. But how do we navigate those challenges? So Brian, I'm going to come back to you, actually, because in your innovation role, how are you addressing the potential for bias in AI-generated content or insights, and what steps are you taking to ensure that fairness and accuracy?
I think about bias in AI as an extension of bias that exists in the world. AI is trained on knowledge that we as people have created over the course of humanity, right? And so everything that shows up within an AI is going to have the same biases that other places have, other sources of information. And that's why I think it's so important to make sure that we have a human in the loop. And that's why AI should be augmented intelligence, not artificial intelligence, not a replacement for our thinking. So you've got to have somebody who can look at what comes out of AI and say, hey, does this align with where we want our brand to go?
Yeah, that makes sense. And Rachel, for you, brand integrity and trust have to be so important for your comms. How do you maintain that when you're using AI in your comms, especially areas like content creation or anything else that you might have experienced?
Yeah, and actually just on the kind of responsible use of AI, it does feel like this is the bit that's maybe kind of out of sync. Maybe this, along with the kind of commercialization of it, does feel like it's a little bit behind the actual implementation of AI. It's sort of, we've kind of rushed from the hype to implement and kind of left the responsible bit and the responsible use bit behind slightly. So I think this is where, companies like EY working alongside companies like Microsoft, I think this is where we can really start to add some value. Last year, EY launched their Responsible AI Council to look at this. And we should be starting to get those kind of first insights and findings back from that. In EY, we are actually regulated, so we're quite constricted by what tools, AI tools we can use. So one of the challenges we've got with our team is that we're probably not allowed to use, because we are regulated, some of these kind of more fun ones. I know there are some trials. I know that I think there's a trial with Synthesia, but just generally we've been quite constrained in terms of the tools that we've been able to utilize and use, and this is partly why. It's because of this responsible use. But yeah, you just need to have that human at the center. You need to have that human lens across everything you do. You need to be fact checking. Even when we were training, the team were telling me, and I've got two of my kind of most junior, youngest team members training this AI agent that we're going to be working with. And they were telling me that it's like training a toddler. So it's like training a 2-year-old, and they're having to, it's coming back and they're going back and saying, no, that's not right. This is how you would say it. And a lot of my team talk about these kind of, the hallucinations and things. So yeah, you just need to, and this is where the human piece comes in. It's so important, just to have that layer of like fact checking and making sure that, what you're saying, not just is accurate, but also just from the authenticity piece, which I'm sure we'll come on to, but just that authentic piece, which is so important as a communicator. We have to be really, I think, quite mindful there.
Yes, I would agree. Now, Steve, I'd want to reassure you that I don't think Rachel was dinging any Microsoft tools when she talked about other fun ones she's not allowed to use. But I do want to pick up on the point she raised around responsible AI development, because Microsoft's been a real leader in that space. So are there any key principles that guide your use of AI in comms, and how do you ensure compliance across such a large team?
Yeah, we have. The quick way to answer that is, we've had a responsible AI group at Microsoft for about 8 years, so well in advance of this sort of era of generative AI. And we've actually published, we're now into the second version of what we call a responsible AI guidelines, which we can share with folks after the call. But they go into a lot of detail primarily on I will call it the input side. So how do we build products? Every product at Microsoft that gets built with AI has to go through a responsible AI review. It goes through a whole number of different gates and checks and balances around bias and transparency and accuracy. So there's a lot of work, and even things that I build on my team. So this is for products that Rachel is using and Brian's using, like Copilot. But even for things that I build and use internally, my team has to go through a gating process to make sure that they are responsible, they're accurate, that we've got transparency around using AI. So there's a lot of rigor and discipline, which at times can be incredibly frustrating because it takes me longer than I would like to build things. But it's a reassurance of we're building these things properly. So on the input side, there's a lot of process rigor that we have there. And then on the output side, certainly from a communications point of view, we have clear, I wouldn't even say they're guidelines, they're rules, that if we are using AI in any case externally, then we're incredibly transparent about that. We generally, the places we've only really used it in our communications work has been around image generation on a few specific projects. And we've been very clear to say, these images were generated with AI. But maybe just the final thing I'll say is, you've heard both Brian and Rachel say several times, this idea of human in the loop. And for us, that will always be the case. We're not going to have this process where we automate social media tweets by saying, oh, create a tweet based on this blog and then just push it out onto the platform. Because that's just, it's sort of dangerous. I think it's unethical. And, you want to have somebody who is representing the company with the finger on the button that presses that.
Yeah. Where does the buck actually stop if it's not with a person? So before we move on, is there any final advice that you'd give to anyone watching today who is concerned about any of the ethical implications? And I'll throw that out to the group. What a top tip for anyone worried about ethical implications?
Use your common sense. That 26 years in corporate comms, we have to think about what we say. I would apply that to your use of AI as well. Just be mindful and use it sensibly, use it responsibly. I think this is the really key thing where we do need that human lens, because even with the social media agent that we're working on, like we're training and we're hoping to implement, we have to be really careful. 2 wrong words and you could really damage your brand. So there's a reputational brand piece, protection piece there that I think is really important. So just use your good, that's, I think, one thing that PR people are really good at. That's a sort of superpower that we have. We have good judgment generally, and we can make that decision. Sometimes in PR, there's no right or wrong. You've just got to make a judgment call, and you've got to use it based on your experience and based on your instinct. Apply that with AI, I would say.
I think that's very, very sage advice. And I'm sure, I know we've got people joining us around the world, but everyone can remember some of the terrible events, the Willy Wonka experience written with an AI script that actually got as far as going live and selling tickets that became the meme of the year last year. I'm going to move us on to look ahead a little bit at some emerging trends and maybe some future possibilities for AI and comms. Steve, you're at the cutting edge. Not that I want to put you on the stage here, but what are you most excited about in terms of any new capabilities that you anticipate emerging maybe over the next few years that people should be looking out for?
Honestly, the one I'm most excited about is this thing I talked about earlier, Researcher. It's just like, it blows my mind. I'm so excited about what it can do. I'm putting together a book proposal at the moment. One of my sort of hobby projects of the company is I run a book imprint for the company.
What? That's amazing.
And so we've been talking about a new book that we want to create. And so we talk with multiple people internally. We've got transcripts of these conversations we've had. We've got transcripts of the meetings that we had with the people who are thinking about the book. And we put them all into Researcher, uploaded them as files, and said, hey, help us create an outline for a book. This book is going to be on design at Microsoft. And it asked a bunch of questions. And I just looked at it again this morning, and I'm like, this thing is unbelievable. So I've sent it off to my editor, and he's taken a look at it, and it's probably going to save him a day's work. So I'm excited about that for sure. And then I think the other thing I'm excited about is just the continual emergence of this multimodality. When we started with ChatGPT, it was text in and text out. And here we are 2 years later, and you can put images in and get text out. You can put text in and get images out. You can put text in and get videos out. And, maybe my favorite example of that is with one of my kids who a couple of weeks ago came home and she said, Dad, what are we going to have for dinner? And I'm no chef, just to shame myself there. And I said, I have no idea. So I opened the fridge, I picked up my phone, I took a photograph, and I used Copilot, and I said, hey, Copilot, what can I make with the contents of the fridge? And it said, oh, you've got a squash in here, and you've got some milk, and you've got some eggs, and you've got, obviously condiments. And it's like, you can make a really good butternut squash soup. And in fact, here's a recipe for a butternut squash soup. And spoiler alert, I didn't make the soup. But just stuff like that is,
but you could have,
being able, I could have made it really badly. But just being able to, when you're traveling, is like explore the world and take a photograph of something and say, explain to me what that is. Or another one is a couple of months ago, I was in New York and I really wanted a slice of pizza late at night. And I said to Copilot, hey, Copilot, what are 3 places I can get a pizza by the slice in a 1 mile radius of where I'm currently stood? And it instantly came back with an answer of slice places, not restaurants, places that sell it by the slice, because obviously the phone knows where I am based on GPS, and Copilot's got access to search engines. It understands what I'm asking for, and it gives me back an answer. And so Diamond Pizza on Lafayette is a great place to get a slice of pizza if you're in New York.
That conversational piece is absolutely game changing, isn't it, in terms of how you interact? Now, Rachel, your common sense advice was excellent. I'm sure well received by our audience. So I'm going to ask you for some more advice. What it would be the sort of some actionable strategies that comms teams can implement today to get ready for tomorrow?
Something that I think has helped EY is certainly partnering with others and working with others. That has been hugely helpful in terms of like identifying the best, most appropriate tools that we can then use, and then just getting, offering the training, the introduction to the tools, like get trying to encourage people to use them. Like one of the things I love about my team is just like generally like the excitement that they've got around AI and trying new features. That is, I think, like a really great way potentially for us to use it as a tool to maybe retain talent as well. So it's like a bit of like an added value. So we actually take away some of those, tasks and, replace them with, these, time saving, more efficient tools. The other thing that I has really helped in terms of like being more strategic for us is just also making sure that we're staying on top of the news agenda by following and really engaging with those global top tier like AI journalists. And I mean, I'm following, probably we all are, but like certainly like Wall Street Journal, Axios, Fortune, like Jeremy Kahn is incredible. So like I like digest his content like at a rate of knots. There's some really like that is just a really great way to help inform your strategy, because they're almost like feeding you what's topical, what's trending, what's hot, and it's just a really great way to get coverage in terms of engaging with them, and then obviously like helping to understand what they're looking for. I'm actually currently reading Jeremy Cahn's book at the moment, which is really great, and I think that's something like in terms of informing our strategy and our strategic approach is just really just leaning into it, leaning into the agenda, leaning into the news agenda, and just really engaging and following those kind of top tier journalists that are really, I think, and the great thing about them as well is that they are speaking to so many different leaders. They're speaking to so many different businesses that they're able to get the perspective of Databricks and IBM and Microsoft and, all the different companies, NVIDIA, which is really, fantastic in terms of for comms people and helping to make sure that our strategy is really relevant and appropriate for the here and now.
Yeah, that's all good advice. And I think another piece of advice that you had given to me was pick one thing and practice it, which I think is that habitual change that everyone has been talking about today.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's really important in terms of just like don't be afraid, like don't feel overwhelmed. I've had a couple of people, not just in my team, but just in my, the wider organization, come to me and say, we're feeling a bit overwhelmed. We're just, we're not really, we don't feel we're on top of it. We don't feel we're keeping the pace with it. And that's what I said to them. I said, look, just day by day, step by step. It's like, do you remember when? Well, not everybody in this call will remember. I certainly do. Was when social media started. We hadn't done a degree in social media, but we had to learn to use these tools. We all had to learn at the same pace. I think it's very similar to that. We've all got to learn. We've all got to explore, experiment, try. And I said to them, look, with regards to the co-pilot, just focus on Word. Don't worry about PowerPoint or Excel. I mean, I'm certainly not using it for Excel. It's too much for me. But certainly Word. Just use it for that. Just try one thing step by step, day by day. Don't feel overwhelmed by it. I think there's a lot of hype, and I think we think everyone else is using it, and they're not. They're not. I know that. I was at WEF earlier this year, met with lots of different communicators, and I realised that I was actually ahead of them when I actually thought maybe I was behind. So just go at your own pace and just take it day by day.
Sage words. We do have some questions that have been coming in, so I want to allow a bit of time for the Q&A, but before we close out this discussion, I want to look back to a piece that came up earlier around the hiring shifts that we can expect to see. And actually my question would be, for as a comms professional in the future, what skills should be the most important to develop? Brian, perhaps you want to kick that one off.
Yeah, I think it's about connecting the dots. That's the biggest thing. You could get spot solutions for whether it's a deep research project like Steve was talking about, or a an automated piece of content that was generated like Rachel was talking about. But do you have the ability to pull these different pieces of information together and be able to make something that is strategic and important? That I think is going to be the biggest key for the future of our profession, being able to make sense of the chaos, be able to take multiple inputs and turn them into an output.
Great. Any more before I turn to the questions that we've had coming through?
You know what to do right now. We're all communicators on this call, right? Some of us are responsible for rolling out AI to our communications team. But the thing is that all of us are corporate communicators at some level, and every company is becoming a tech company. AI is putting technology into. It doesn't even matter if you're making washing machines, or if you're making apps. You at some level are going to be asked to contribute to and communicate something about your company's AI. And therefore, it's incumbent, I think, on all of us to stay up to date with this and really exercise conversational fluency in AI topics, not just so that we can apply it to our work, but so that we can apply it to our day-to-day work of communicating what our company wants us to communicate about.
That makes absolute sense. I'm just looking at some of the questions that we've had coming in. And we have one, and I think I might understand it correctly. Do you have suggestions for working with subject matter experts who are using AI to replace their own voices and expertise? So I think that's you're working with somebody and they keep using AI and you need to get them to not do it, if I'm reading that question correctly. And if you understand it differently, let me know.
The best example probably is social media, maybe for that one. I think it's really apparent or obvious when you're looking at LinkedIn and you can see that somebody's post has been written by AI. There's just certain cues and words. There tends to be quite a lot of marketing speak as well. And actually for LinkedIn, I think, this authenticity piece is like obviously hotly debated at the moment with LinkedIn, but I think just, making sure that you remember you are a human being and to speak like a human, not like a chatbot is key there, I think. So we're quite, we encourage our teams, use it as use it to help you. But you definitely need to make sure that it's the appropriate tone of voice and that it's a human voice, not
I have a little bit more context to that question that I can see now. And it's for somebody who's writing a corporate blog and they've got quite a technical marketing engineers and they've been using AI to write content. It's not that the content's not gone through a human, but it's not linking to sources. And they're quite worried about plagiarism and hallucinations and then sort of really fact checking that data and how heavily it's been lent on. It's kind of coming back to some of the ethics stuff. And maybe it's also coming back to some of the governance. I'm not trying to create an answer here, but perhaps there is a governance piece of saying, if you are doing that, you have to fact check.
I would say a few things. One is if people are using, I think about it as input and output. And so using it for input, if you're using it for input, then call that out and say, hey, AI was used in the generation of this. And there's a bit of a line there where if you're genuinely just using it more for research, then maybe it doesn't need to be called out as like, hey, this was generated with AI. But if AI is being used on the output side, then I think it's incumbent on all of us to make that clear to people. And where people can is to use sources. But the two other things I would say, or certainly one other thing is, a way I would go back to a group like that is to say, hey, take the copy. This is a little bit of a meta statement, but take the copy that you've got and give it back to AI and say, does this sound like a human? And I will bet that the AI would say, no, this doesn't sound like a human, and you need to adjust it and put more emotion and more personality. And so I try and do that quite a lot, is like, how can I use the tools both to help me, but also to keep me honest? Because one of the things that we see why people really like using AI is because it's much easier to ask AI a question than it is to ask a colleague a question. because it comes without judgment and it comes without, bias and all of these things. But I think broadly speaking, what I would say is just thinking about AI as input and AI as output and being very clear about that.
Yeah, I think that's good advice, coming at it with a level head. Another question that we had in is, my company is encouraging people to use AI because it will save time and energy. And I'm concerned that statement makes time and energy the highest goods and the highest goals, which they're not. The hard work of pondering complex topics, researching and articulating a response is necessary to critical thinking. What are your thoughts on how to use AI without sacrificing that good mental work? And actually, I'm going to chuck that to Steve, because I think you've done that quite a good job of how to balance the two. So how could a comms leader push that back into the business and really championing the value of you working in tandem and co-piloting with AI?
Yeah, I do. Well, I'll challenge it a little bit, because I do think that time is in fact the most important resource that we have at work and in life, right? And I constantly remind my kids of this. It's like you make choices on where you want to spend your time. And so I do think time is an incredibly valuable resource. And if I can use that time more efficiently, and to get super tactical, I use Copilot exactly to do that. Like at the start of my week, I will say, Copilot, help me look at my schedule for the week ahead. Give me a bulleted list back of the meetings that I have, any pre-read documents that I need to read ahead of those meetings, or things that I should know from conversations or emails or things that have gone on in the past few weeks to help me prepare for it. And it does an incredibly good job of making me more time efficient. And then to go back to this researcher thing, I do think the word or the phrase critical thinking has come up a lot here today. And I think that is the most important skill of the future. It's the most important skill today, but that's going to become more and more and more important. And so back to this researcher thing that I know I keep banging on about, but it's helping me improve my critical thinking, because instead of me spending time having to go away and do a deep body of research on how to create a book or how to, create an infographic around this, 120 Microsoft product, it's doing the research for me. But then I'm sitting down and looking at the output and saying, okay, is this what I want? Do I have more questions? And having this tool that I can constantly ask questions of without judgment, 24 hours a day, wherever I am in the world, like it's an unbelievable resource to help me make much better use of my time.
That makes sense. Now, the next question we've got in is more around use cases for internal and employee comms beyond drafting or improving copy. Has anyone in this team had some experience with the internal and employee comms side of things that they can maybe give some examples with?
We're doing some work there around, again, not to try and sell product here, but we have a product called Viva that our team is using that and looking at how do we take the employee feedback that we see across Viva. We're a large company, like the folks here, 200 and something thousand people. And so you get a lot of commentary. And so we use AI at times to say, well, let's put that commentary together and use AI to help us do some sentiment analysis on it, or pull out the key themes or summarize the key themes. That's not to say that we don't go and read all the commentary, but it's proved very useful for doing large scale analysis of unstructured data.
That sounds very handy, especially if you're dealing with large teams and actually looking at that, because nothing drives employees more mad than more surveys. So if you can do fewer surveys and do more with the data, that's going to help you. Okay.
Also, the last thing that any employee wants to see is yet another long email, right? From senior leadership.
You've been listening to me, Brian.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I get this feedback from Kate all the time. So now, if I'm going to blast out an all agency email, I will run it through Copilot every time and say, hey, how's this going to land? What's going to be actionable out of this? What can I pull up and maybe make into bullets that will make this easier for my colleagues to read?
We have one more question, and it's coming in around, how do I get my content to show up or be optimized for LLMs? Anyone got any thoughts on this? Oh, you gave a spicy face, Brian.
I was just excited. I don't know who asked the question, but I'm going to Venmo them $1 on the way out. There are really 4 things that you can do. One is earned media. People say all the time, oh my gosh, I'm so worried about my job as an earned media specialist because of AI. And I'm like, no, actually, friend, your job is now more important than ever because these large language models pick up authoritative sources like top tier earned media. And it's not just top tier. Sometimes it comes back to very obscure publications. So you've got to really monitor and analyze what the AI says about your brand to be able to figure out what outlets you need to be targeting. Second thing is your website. Your website is often picked up by LLMs, especially for innovation related topics. So your website now needs to be not just designed for people to read, but for AI to read because AI will read it and regurgitate it on your behalf, and surprisingly uncritically as well, I might add. So I think about this as like the return of the FAQ. The frequently asked questions list, publishing that with your press release on your website could get AI to actually pick up those questions and answers and use them. Social media, getting your brand, not just your brand, but your people out there. So all of those consultants from EY, from Microsoft, from Axicom out there talking and repeating the messages and sharing the insights, you'll get cited more and your people, your expertise will get cited more. And then finally, Wikipedia. Kind of the third rail for communicators for a long time. But we're seeing more engagement with clients than ever in Wikipedia because of the way to ethically engage and be able to influence that platform through the relationships that we have with the platform.
Excellent.
So that was a lot, but I'm excited.
But
I'm excited about this.
Good key takeaways that people can walk away with. Now, we have 1 minute left before we are due to close, so I am going to wrap us up because we are very much at time. The last question that kept coming through on the panel is, I missed the first half. Is it going to be recorded? If you registered for this, you will be able to access the recording afterwards. We will be in touch with how that works, so don't worry about that. And thank you so much to our panelists, Steve, Rachel, Brian. I think we could have gone on for hours. Yeah. So we probably need a part 2. And thank you to everybody who's tuned in today. We've had people around the world joining, and I hope you've all been able to take away something actionable that you can dig your teeth into. Now, at Axicom, we very much believe in a future where innovation and passion go hand in hand. So throughout today's event, and together as a global comms community of specialists, I actually believe that we can up-level the communication industry for the new AI era. And everything we heard today means we have to keep humanity and empathy at the heart of our craft. So the humans are never going to go away. We have to use our common sense, as Rachel said, and just make sure we can up-level our work by automating the tasks that we don't like, that are going to take too long, as Steve is nailing and leading by example on. So thank you all so much for your time. I will bid you adieu and watch out for the follow-up materials that will come through. Thank you all very much. Take care.